there's still that temptation. That never actually goes away.
Yeah. We don't stew on our resources. We steward them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. God can do more with 90% of my money than I can with 100% of my money.
I had to get to the point where I was just willing to let it go. And then that's when finally things started to work. And it's just it feels like a paradox, like an oxymoron. When you let go is actually when you begin to experience that abundance.
That was just kind of the biggest perspective change. And that may be a terrible metaphor, but I think that the irony in it for me was that I thought I was in control when in reality it was controlling me. It was a painful moment for me. It was my second son's first birthday, and I wanted to throw him a birthday party. We couldn't. We could not afford it. So one of the ways that I combat that, and I don't think you're going to like this very much.
Welcome to the Formed by Jesus podcast. I'm so excited for this series. So this is season 6. I don't know which episode number it is, but season 6 is all about generosity. So as a church family in the month of August, we were talking about what does it mean to be generous? And our working definition is the practice of generosity is living like disciples who trust the God of abundance by giving like stewards who tithe to God's kingdom. And so our favorite part of the season of this podcast is when we interview people from our church. So today we have the privilege of learning from and talking to Derek Powell. How are you today, sir?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
Just wonderful, man. It's a Saturday. Saturdays are one of my favorite days. As you know, already started set up at 7 a.m.
Yep.
Get to say hi to everybody and hang out. So I love this rhythm. So I think one of the best moves we did was to shift setup from Sunday mornings to Saturdays. It's not frantic. Good time to get together, although it's starting to get cold.
I'll take it though.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So as this intro music goes, man, who is Derek Powell? Give me a quick intro.
All right. So, hey, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for having me, Trey.
Absolutely.
My name is Derek Powell. I am a Phoenix Metro local. There's very few of us left here.
That's right.
I've been here my entire life. I've seen this place explode. Living on Power and McKellips up in Northeast Mesa where I grew up. At one point, it was a 4-way dirt road stop with stop signs. So, you truly just watching this place grow. And then, I have spent my entire life in Arizona. I
can't say the same.
That's
I spent
right.
4 years in California, so
yeah,
made me appreciate here more.
Did it? Yeah, I love the desert. I do. And so I'm married. My wife, Bibi, we have been married for what years? 12 years.
Oh, cool.
I'm
right behind you.
Yeah.
We're at 11.
Oh, yeah? Okay. We have 4 kids. Leo, my oldest, he is 11. Reese is 9. Vera is 7. And we have a 3-year-old Trudy. Things are chaotic. They are very busy. And
we baptized Leo on Easter.
That's right. Yeah,
you baptized Leo.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
That was, what a treat.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that, family does take a lot of time, and I'm totally okay with that. I think that, my primary responsibility is to make sure that I am leading these kids as faithfully as I possibly can. And
we were talking about that intentional fatherhood, with John Tyson. Do you remember because there was one where it's like, they were around, they were present, but they weren't intentional. Do you remember those?
Oh no, that was...
But anyways, from the language I've heard from you talk, like you're seeking to not just be a present father, but like engaged, like intentional with your time.
Yeah. No, in that book, just to kind of briefly reference what the framework for it is like, imagine your child is leaving you, right? Your child is leaving you. He's got a suitcase in his hand and everything he owns is in that suitcase. Well, it's not just about possessions. This is about experiences. This is about skills. This is about knowledge. This is about wisdom. And how do you take those intentional steps of preparing him with more and more as he steps into manhood, right? And presenting this, and I'm not going to capture everything for it, but, really just, I think that a lot of men struggle with understanding, like, am I grown up, right? Like,
sure. There's no initiation.
Yeah. There's no initiation. There's no ceremony, and really working to create a framework around him to enable him to know that he is growing, that he is working towards manhood, that he is surrounded by men that care about him, and he is observing and watching, godly men around him in what it means to be a godly man.
Yeah, I think actually my initiation, if I had one, it did feel like it was a moment, was always hunting. And so my initiation at 12 was when I shot my own deer. And like that was a thing. And it's like, all right, you've watched for all these years. You're the ones who got to split them open. You're the ones who got to carry them out. And so I think it's something that I can point to. And they were talking about in that book, and this whole podcast is not about that book, but that's what I love about this podcast. We're going to go anywhere and everywhere. But there is a need for something like a milestone moment to say you are a man. And I do appreciate a lot of his stuff on that. And I think, man, that's just so needed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that he references some unique ones. I mean, like remember in 300 where he had to go out into the woods and kill the wolf, and he's not allowed to come back until he kills the wolf, right? And he references about, other groups of people who have these initiation ceremonies, that really validate the young boy becoming a man. He compliments the LDS community about sending out their youth on missions and coming back being completely far more prepared for adulthood. And other ceremonial types of things like bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, right?
Yeah.
So
let's make up one, man.
Right.
Let's figure it out. I don't have sons, but I'm like, I guess. That's a little bit a part of like, that's sad. And I thought, well, I still have an opportunity as a pastor to encourage fathers to be good fathers for their sons, because I need good sons for my daughters to marry.
Right.
So it's in my best interest.
Yeah. So if you're listening, mothers, fathers, intentional father, even if you are a father of girls or you are a mother of read it.
Yeah.
It's got there's a lot you can pull from it. So it's not just about this relationship between a father and his son.
True.
There is a lot you can learn from it, and really just take a great look back at the way we're raising our children and equipping them for adulthood. Yeah.
I just wanted to start out by honoring you with that, because I've noticed your intentionality. Even like your we don't have to get into it, but like your recent Flagstaff trip and the stuff that you guys did, it's like, that's so cool. Like, that's just great to spend time that way.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about generosity. So the practice of generosity. And I'm actually really excited because we had been chatting kind of like really in the context. This is like our second sit down. We met one time at Black Rock, and it was one of those like, oh shoot, I don't want to leave, but I have to leave situations. Yeah. So I'm excited for this one. But you have been alluding to your story, but I don't really know it. So I'm excited that it's not like, hey, I heard this story, let me share it with you. It's interested and curious.
Yeah.
Just about your journey. You've been a follower of the way. Of course, I actually never want to say your whole life, because I think there is a moment of conversion, and then all of us have these backsliding moments and all of that, but still, you've been around the things of God. And so, where do you want to start your story? You just go, I'm laying out the floor for you, specifically when it comes to generosity, and there's just a lot of obstacles and narratives that people believe that make this difficult. So that's kind of what we want to hear. It's one thing for me on Sunday to say, hey, here's why you should give. I think it's something else for people like you, just people in our church, like, hey, this is kind of the journey I've been on.
Yeah, no, I think that it might be helpful to understand, how I viewed giving and generosity growing up. I think that it's helpful to understand how I became the way I became, and how long I was that way, and then just kind of the challenges for truly unwiring that and surrendering that to God. And so I think that a good way to start about this might be like, talking about what kind of narratives were given to me about generosity, about tithing as a child and growing up in my family. And so I grew up in a family that went to church every Sunday. So tithing in generosity wasn't really a narrative that was spoken. It wasn't like, hey, we tithe for these reasons. We are generous for these reasons. They just did it.
Yep, there's the dogs.
They just did it, right? So I actually feel like, we sat on the back row of church all the time because I watched my mom write checks in church, put it in the offering plate as it passed by, right? And so the second you start hearing "Just As I Am" on the piano and the organ, You knew she was whipping out that checkbook and writing it as fast as she possibly could before the offering plate would catch her. And so she could write that check into that. So that, I mean, I observed her every Sunday doing this, sitting in the back row of church, writing these checks, right? But just because it wasn't spoken out doesn't mean that it wasn't observed. I think that my
More
parents
is caught than taught, right?
Right. And it wasn't just spoken about, it was done, right? Like they didn't have to say, we are generous people, we are generous for this reason. They just did it. And even to this day, my parents are still like the most generous people I have ever encountered. There is nothing they won't do for a perfect stranger. And I think that spoke a lot, even if you don't have the words, you don't have the framework, you just do. People are watching. You learn to be generous as you're doing that. And it wasn't just with finances, right? Like this was with time. This was with talents. My dad's good at everything. Up until he blew his knee out, he still got picked before me in basketball at 60 years old. We would play pickup basketball at church. He was always picked before me. He's good at everything. It's frustrating. So
I have a similar dad. Yep.
So he's good at everything. And that just meant that, like he would expend his talents, like sacrificially spend his time with people and serving other people because, I believe he's been given everything he's ever needed through his salvation, through that. So it's like his cup is overfilling. He has to pour into others. So it's not just generosity, but with finances, but it's with time and talents and resources. You could call my parents and be like, hey, can I borrow name X thing on their property? Yeah, come and get it.
Yeah, it's a way of life.
Absolutely. So, but that being said, our family, we grew up in what I'm perceiving now as to be a fairly average middle income family, right? We were never without, but we weren't keeping up with the Joneses either, right? So that meant that like if I wanted something and it wasn't for my birthday, it was outside the cost of my allowance. It was outside of holidays like Christmas or something like that. I had to work to go earn it, right? And as an aspiring rock star at the age of 13, I had expensive taste for a 13-year-old. So it's not like I can go to my mom and say, "Hey, mom, let me get $600 real quick and go get a guitar." She's like, "Oh, okay, cool. Funny story." So I wanted to be a musician, even at a really young age, but that meant I had to earn it, right? And that's not a bad thing that I had that type of initiative to go and earn that.
Right.
So in junior high, I worked in my lunch hours in the cafeteria to make money.
Really?
But yeah. So I mean, my friends were eating lunch. I was working in the cafeteria as a cashier to make money, right?
Wow.
Because at 14, you couldn't legally go get a job at that point. But the sole purpose of me doing that was to buy music gear, and that continued to persist, right? So it started with music gear. I got a lot of music gear. Then I needed a car, so I went and got a car. And then it's like I got a car. Well, I want to take this car places. So now it's traveling and it's adventures, and so I got a goal. I obtained that goal. I set a new goal. I went after that goal, but it always involved work and it involved money.
Were you giving along the way?
No.
Okay.
No. And so that's where that I think I developed this selfish initiative. And again, the work ethic wasn't bad, but I was definitely missing part of this in hindsight. So this persisted though, all the way through until I got married. So, my wife and I got married. She wasn't a Christian when we got married.
And how old were you when you got married? I'm going to start to do math on how old you are. How old are you? Because then I can just minus 12. Okay, so 25? 24,
Yep.
25-ish?
Yep.
Okay. So that's a long enough time to develop real money habits.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about 12 years in developing, core habits from a very young age that what I work for is mine and mine alone. And, even when we got married, we realized how much of our relationship was built off of convenience. We liked the same things. We did the same things. And the second we started to, kind of spend more time and try to meld these things together, it very clearly became that we were both very, very selfish people, right? So what's interesting too is like, instead of marriage counseling, we decided to do Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University.
Oh, awesome.
So, we were aligned with how we wanted to work with our money, how we wanted to be with our money, that it was important to be debt free, that it was important to pay off our debt. So we were, more educated on our money, and to prove our dedication to these principles, we went on a honeymoon to Paris, Florence, and Rome and maxed out a credit card. But it was okay though. It was okay because we were going to come home. We had two incomes at the point. We were gonna pay it off real quick, and then we we're gonna go do it again. Mm-hmm. Well, lo and behold, we got pregnant 2 months later, and so 9 months later, we have a child that's born out of network. We're tens of thousands of dollars in medical bills now, 2 car payments, 2 student loan payments, and the credit card we never actually paid down on. So we are, in the spreadsheet red at this point. And so what ended up happening with that was we had to sell our house. So we had a house at the time. We sold our house and we paid off all of our debt, but it came with the cost of me living with my mother-in-law for 9 months, with a child. And, really taking a toll on my pride, if I'm being honest, where it's just like, you had one job, Derek, like one job, and that's to be a provider. And, again, when you start to look at these selfish interests, like these selfish interests actually bled into my marriage and then bled into my parenthood, because I was focused on me. And then all of a sudden my priorities have to change when I got married, and I was too dumb to see it. And then it was too late by the time my firstborn was here.
So this was pretty quick into your marriage, though, that you're learning this really hard lesson.
Oh, yeah. Our first year of marriage was tough. It was tough. And God got a hold of my wife after our firstborn was born. Truly, at the moment he was born, she looked at this boy and was like, there is a God, and this God loves me. Wow. I don't know what this means, but the moment he was born, like, she looked at him and she knew at that point.
So were you still going to church in that first year? Like when she wasn't?
Yeah.
Was she going with you? Just not like
so
all in kind of thing?
She had to go to church with me because she lost a bet.
Nice.
So she had to start going to church with me because she lost a bet. And, she went there, but having grown up Catholic and then being very she wanted nothing to do with church or faith or God or anything, she went with me. I don't know why. I guess I could say probably because she loves me. But yeah, it was that was just kind of that starting point for her, which she is just continued, like she has experienced God there. She can't unexperience it. And she's just continued to pursue and chase him through the ups and downs and pursue him.
That's awesome. Sorry for the detour.
No.
I was just interested.
It's all extremely relevant to this too.
Yeah.
Because I think that, before she was saved, had I gone to her and I said, hey, I want to tithe. And she's like, yeah, with your money, go ahead.
Oh, right.
Or if, we had that shared bank account at the point, she's like, with our money? Yeah, no, I don't think so. So that would have been really, really tough along those times. So yeah, we, needless to say, I had to live with my mother-in-law for 9.5 months. We saved up some money, we got back on our feet, and we got into our next house. But coming at that next house also put us basically at that zero budget that Dave Ramsey talks about. We were there for 4 years. And it was a frustrating time because it was like, I made all the right decisions, right? Well, not all of them, clearly, because I just spoke 5 minutes ago about being an idiot with a credit card.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I stayed out of trouble for the most part. For the most part, I stress. I went to college. I got a bachelor's degree. I went to college. I got a master's degree. I bought a home. I have been faithful. It's just like, aren't I owed a break of some kind, right? But we could not break that barrier. We were just barely getting by. It was just like, I made all the right decisions. Why are we struggling so much? And I think that probably one of the more, it was just kind of more of a, again, it was a painful moment for me. It was my second son's first birthday, and I wanted to throw him a birthday party. We couldn't. We could not afford it. The best I could do for him.
And meanwhile, you are budgeting.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
am budgeting. We are laying out
Which is why you can't afford it.
Yeah. To learn something along the way, right?
Yeah.
The best I could do for him was a single cookie at the soda shop. And I have this picture, and I look at this picture from time to time. And I know, and I look back at that time, and it was just, again, like, Derek, you had one job, right? It's that same moment I had the first time where it's like, you had one job to provide. You had one job to provide, and this is the best you could do. You made all the right decisions. And I think that, it wasn't until, okay, the next part of this is that we had scrimped and saved for about a year to save to go see my sister-in-law in Portland. And it took us like a year to save a measly like $600-700, like just scrimping and saving and every little bit we could to make it out there. And we went to our church at our time, and we had a very important message about faithfulness and giving and the connection between those two things. And the Spirit was just pressing on me so hard that night with this idea of like, God can do more with 90% of my money than I can with 100% of my money.
That's a word.
And I mean, it was like a million pounds just crushing me. It was just like, I had to do something with this conviction. And so I took every penny that we had saved and I gave it that night. And I went home and I told my wife
That you saved for that trip.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And she's like, "Oh, you did."
So you had already did it and then said, "Hey, by the way."
Yes.
Yeah.
So had she have been, not saved at the time,
Yeah.
she probably would have divorced me. So maybe just open another credit card and max that one out too.
Right.
So she's like, "Okay, trust you." And, it like 2 weeks later, I get a call from a potential employer, and I interview with that employer. And within 3 weeks, I have got the job with this employer that doubled my income.
Wow.
And I'm careful to tell the story because I don't think this is everybody's outcome, right? And I'm careful to tell the story because I can sit here and be unqualified to say I know what God is doing, but I can say I think I know what God was doing in that moment. And what I think God was doing in that moment, I think that He was ready to give me more blessings, but I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Because I was being stingy with what I had, right? When I thought I had control over my life with the budget that we had, what little budget we had, right? The moment I let that go and I decided to worship God with everything, with open hands, it was the moment He was like, "Okay, you're ready for more blessings," right? And it was almost instantaneous for us. I know that's not the case for everybody. Now, mind you, when I say almost instantaneous, it still pressed our trust because there was a lapse in our pay period between jobs as well. So we were down to our last $100 in our banking account, our last net worth of $100.
And at that point, do you not do credit cards at all?
No,
like
we
Dave
had
Ramsey.
Well,
or do you have like an emergency?
We have an emergency credit card.
Yeah.
So it was down to our last $100 of savings.
Wow.
And it pushed us to that the brink of that. And it's like, God's asking us, "Do you trust me?" Like, "Yep, we trust you." And the interesting part, I think that as I have grown since then as well, I long to have more income for these things. I long to have more income. I long to have these things. I felt like I was deserving of it because I had worked and I had done all the right things. And in reality, now that I have been blessed with these things more than I ever had imagined, none of it matters. It is a tool that has been trusted to me to steward, to use at use for everything, right? And
let me recap a couple things.
Sure.
So I think people can be encouraged by a few things. One, even to hear that you were budgeting and still just barely making it. And I mean, I just relate to that so much. I would beat myself up. So I've always had 10%. I've never not given, tithe. So that's just part of my story. And it's also my dad always did that. It was similarly modeled, and I just, again, I'm a pastor, so it's like that kind of stuff I wrestled with before getting into the calling. So as we got married, I mean, we'd have to penny pinch every single month until like, honestly, like a year ago. And it's just really hard because we made the decision to not have my wife work. That way she can raise the kids at home and all of that. And so I think it's helpful to remind people, because I know you're pushing back against this as well. Like, just because you give doesn't mean all of a sudden you're just super wealthy and doing great. For you, I would say, like, because I think a lot of people are suffering because they're not budgeting. But even your story is like, no, I was budgeting, and still we just knew I could only afford a cookie. And I think that's just encouraging to the younger people, people in their 20s just getting started. Like, that's kind of that's part of the gig. I mean, what's the Proverbs? Like, an inheritance gained too soon is actually leads to your destruction. It's not a gift, it's a curse.
Yeah.
So I just imagine, like, your appreciation for God's favor in your life. There's so many good things, and your perspective is such a good one because of those hard years. And so I just think it's good I'm glad you pointed that out. And, because you kind of have both stories where, kind of like you started giving and you started to see favor, but there is a world where when you're budgeting and giving, you didn't see favor for a while. Like, that's a lot of other people's stories too. So, I'm actually thinking about this a lot because I'm studying for our fasting practice in February. And the number one warning every book says about fasting was, don't make it about the outcome. Don't fast so that you get whatever. Fast because you're seeking the heart of God, his presence, seeking to be obedient. In the same way, like, your outlook changed. It wasn't about, oh, I want to get rich, or so I'm going to start giving. Like, that's not the heart that God blesses. He can't bless that kind of. You don't have the capacity for those sorts of blessings because they'll just turn into cursings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that I would even say there's two parts of that as well, just to kind of dovetail into what you're saying. So for instance, even though I have been blessed with more income and I have continued to faithfully tithe, there is a temptation not to, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, maybe a good example of this is, like, if you're looking at your paycheck, right? Like, you look at the number in your bank account, but if you were to actually go to look at the physical check or the statement for it, and it's just like, this is how much went out for your health, for taxes, for dental. And it's just like, man, what could I do with that extra funds? And then, even though I have gotten more income, I think that everybody can agree that this economy's been tough. Money's not going as further as it has. It's like, dude, I am trying the best I can. Why is this not going further?
Yep.
And you can look at that budget and you can see, like, I could do, man, with that little extra money, I could go and I could do whatever. I could finally get that thing, or
good things, not evil, bad things. Yeah.
And I think there's a temptation as well when unexpected income comes in, right? Like tax returns or bonuses, or, even simple things like selling stuff on OfferUp, right? And where it's just like, oh, it's mine. There's still that temptation. That never actually goes away.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that I combat that, and I don't think you're going to like this very much, but it's something I do, is I actually intentionally will tithe every week instead of setting up the autopilot tithing.
Oh, cool.
So I know it.
Why would I not like that?
Well, it would probably be really helpful to be able to predict when things are coming in.
That does help a little on the financial team. Like, when it's recurring, we can kind of trust it a little more. I get what you're saying,
but for me, I have to go in there and I have to manually do that. So, when we were talking about budgets, I actually have our budgets built out for the entire year. So, from January to December, and the reason we do this is because there's fluctuations in our finances, right? Like, we have a birthday season, which is an entire quarter of birthdays. We have high power bills in the summer. You have car tags. That Amazon Prime membership comes out once a year, and you always forget about these things, right?
Yep.
So for us to be able to get ahead of those things and understand, like, oh yeah, remember last year we had to do X work, or it really we prioritize margin.
Smart.
Within this, right? And so for us to be able to practice generosity regularly, we prioritize margin by knowing we build it into the budget. But at the top of every single one of those budgets is tithe. So as I on Fridays when I get paid, I open up our year-long budget, and I look at the next few weeks that are coming out, things that are coming up, if things need to fluctuate. But at the very top of every single one of those is tithe.
So payday is giving day. It's first fruits.
That's right. Yeah, first fruits. Yeah, absolutely. That's usually, and I think that me personally, there is a risk of this becoming kind of a heartless, mindless chore.
Sure.
If I leave it on autopilot and I don't think about it, like I don't think about, the
There's
benefits.
something about feeling the sacrifice, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. There is and the thing is like, the giving was never about the church. I love our church, but it was never about the church. It's never about the building. This was truly about me.
That's actually really healthy.
Right. Like this is to protect me from my own vices, my own tendencies that I still struggle to unwire after, 2 decades of being able to work towards the things that I want in life.
So something I found when people are doing it for, like, in their mind, if they're giving to the church, which of course that's, in theory, that is what you're doing, but you begin to actually think you run the church and own the church, and you get mad if you see anything you don't like, well, why am I giving money for these donuts? So, it can get down to the minute. So, and I never talked about it in the generosity practice, but something that it's been helpful for me, and, I can't find chapter and verse, but my giving is to the Lord. But I give it to a local church because I'm on mission with them. And, as a pastor, I tithe as well. But I think there is something healthy, what you're saying there. Like, this is to God. And so that ties in with our greed. We opened up by talking about how greed is this invisible poison.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Jesus talks about that in Luke 11. And so you're saying, I know how tempting money can be. And the love of money, is the root of all kinds of evil. And so you're saying, man, I want to keep my heart clean. So this is first and foremost why I'm doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, God, we are never without. We are stretched, and we are challenged. And I am constantly reminded that he is sovereign, that he's in control, that he's going to take care of me. But I think that, with that truly transformative moment that night where I let that go, and in giving sacrificially for the first time, it is something that I can't unexperience. And so but as a result, greed, sometimes, I do stress sometimes, it's easily contrasted with the course of events through my life. I know that experience because it's so embedded deeply into who I am, but I know that I can still get greedy. And I think that it shows up in some unexpected ways, right? I give you an example. Like, greed shows up in my life. Like if my kids get ketchup and mustard on the van seat, or they broke a 2-month-old TV, or kind of figuring out what happens when you put scissors to the window screen, or when you drive across the country and your kid gives you strep or pink eye. Like, do you know how much I pay for this car per month? Do you know how much that TV was? Do you know how much we paid to get here? Do you
medical bills?
It's like, what are you doing, right? And so.
These all sounded like real examples.
You don't say.
This is not theoretical.
No, that was 6 unique visits to the urgent care in Portland, Oregon.
Oh man.
For strep throat.
Ew.
It just fell down as like dominoes. But it was like, you work hard, you tithe, and you let your guard down just for a bit. That you bought this little piece of heaven. Right? You paid it in full. It was after I tithed. It was after I paid bills. I've been responsible, and I'm just like, there is even in that point this moment of entitlement that I have bought this in full and paid for it responsibly. But there's this temptation to overreact in that moment. Like, this is a very nice vehicle, and you got ketchup and mustard on the seat. And I mean, even with generosity and abundance, greed can still work its way into these blessings. And it caused me to entirely miss the point of these blessings, right? And that's to worship God with what I've been given to steward. Our home is open for people to come in and allow children to be children. If I get a scratch on my floor, fine. We were in there to develop relationships. And, if my van gets messed up, Yeah, I just outed myself. We drive a minivan, and it's awesome. You have any idea how many crumbs that thing holds?
Nice. Me and my wife in our covenant, we agreed never to get a minivan. But then, I keep hearing how great they are. So I'm kidding. It wasn't in the covenant, but we always said that on our wedding day. We should add in there that we'll never get a van. And then ironically, my last name is Van Camp. So you think, it's just right there. We need to go camping in a van. No, but I love that what you're saying. Like the heart of it, like what we had said in the practice, I'm just reminding myself what we were teaching about. But like we don't stew on our resources, we steward them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so you're saying even if, because this is that's a good point you're making. There's a way where when we give 10%, this is why I think tithing can be the floor, not the ceiling. Because I do think there can be like just some incredible blessings that come in your life and God's calling you to go even above.
Right.
But when we begin to think, and I know, and I just want to be so gracious and sympathetic, because for some people with their $0 budget, they can't give even 5% at this point. And, again, we can say, well, what are you actually paying? All of that. But still, 10% is a huge sacrifice to so many. It's a sacrifice for us. All that to say, though, when we begin to have, I think the Pharisees had this mentality, I gave the 10, the other 90 is mine. And actually, all of it's the Lord's.
Yep.
And what a joy, he's only asking for 10% of it back. Or maybe he's not. It depends on each person and where you're at in your season. But yeah, you're communicating that point. This is all the Lord's.
Yeah.
It's not a permission slip. It's kind of like saying, oh, I went to church. Now I can do whatever I want this week. Oh, I tithe. Now I can use my money however I want.
Yep. Yeah. You did not punch your ticket to entitlement by tithing. And so greed can work your way into that because, again, it's just like, sit here, you work 40 plus hours to get these things, to provide the resources, to provide the opportunities, and they can still be squandered. But again, how are you pointing those around you back to Christ through those moments? So,
yeah, entitlement is just the seed of so much sin. And I think entitlement produces. I was studying it this week. I'm actually preaching to a group of pastors this next week at the convention. So I'm excited for it, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. I didn't go this route, but one thing that I was studying in that is pastors especially, but all of us, we can either fall into self-pity or self-praise. And self-pity, man, I deserve more. I should get this more. Like, look at David. Like, I think his sin with Bathsheba was because of self-pity. I deserve this. I've been working so hard. But also self-praise, just the ego. Look how great. And we use money to boost our ego.
Right.
And both of them, it's just like, no, we're just stewards. And gratitude. Like generosity, you can't really be generous without being grateful. Gratitude is like the muscle behind generosity.
Absolutely. And again, that's not to say that I should just let my kids or people run amok or be taken advantage of or anything like that. But I think that
two things can be true at the same time.
Absolutely. But I think that the generosity goes beyond money. It goes into time. It goes into resources. It goes into your skills. It goes into your knowledge. Because
oh man, what a good point.
Knowledge.
Like, isn't there such a temptation to be like, but if I tell them, then they'll succeed. But I could have. It's that scarcity mentality.
Absolutely. I think that that's really. I would make the point that that's probably pretty popular in the corporate workplace as well.
Sure.
Where you maintain your value because you keep knowledge to yourself, right?
So it's an act of trust. Just
absolutely.
To keep giving it away. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I could see that.
So, and I think those things are important to tackle in generosity as well. And here's why, is because I have been blessed with more than I could ever imagine, right? And as I had mentioned earlier, it's possible that giving can become this static, lifeless process, right? Giving that floor minimum of 10% is just a start with that. Now,
so that is where you started. Okay, yeah, that's a helpful story.
Yeah, it just went for it. And but I think too is just like there is this temptation, the entitlement is just like, okay, I gave my money, I can just do whatever I want, because you can still, live your life in a way at which you are hoarding your time, which is super valuable, especially, and there's not a lot when you got 4 kids. You're hoarding your resources. Like, you may have great tools or skills or things that others would benefit from learning from you, from observing around you. And it doesn't even mean like hard skills, say like carpentry or, computer programming or anything like that. But what if your skill was how you work with your family, how you treat your wife, how you treat your children, and the the treat is to observe how you react around them, right? Like that. But you're not willing to share that knowledge. You're not willing to share that time with someone, in a day and age at which you can consume your entire calendar with sports, dance events, things like that. Like you margin has to go more than just money.
Yeah, that's a decision we had to make because first of all, you obviously have noticed the way we're setting up these practices are they're just 4 weeks. So like every single one, I'm like, we can do 8 to 12 of these. And the plan is to, come around to these practices again at a different angle, address things that we didn't in the beginning. But the reason we so zeroed in on money is because it's the biggest idol in our area, the biggest idol for all of us. And I think it gets so easy to start talking about generosity and you're like, I'm so generous everywhere else. I don't have to be generous with my money.
Right.
The money one is the one that has to be so spoken to directly. And I have found if people are generous with their money, they become generous with their time and all of these other things because they've really learned that heart posture of trusting in the Lord in this very tangible thing. But I was hoping people would make those connections. Oh, generosity is a way of life. Absolutely. But let's not forget money is an actual part of it. Let's not over theorize this and not think of like the nitty gritty, like, okay, get out your checkbook kind of thing.
Absolutely. So maybe we'll just go for this live on the podcast right now. But
yeah,
I have been trying to conceptualize some sort of like metaphor for the way it felt when I decided to give at that point, right? And so work with me on this one.
Let's
go.
go.
May have to cut this entirely and just abruptly start with the next sentence. But when I was clenching onto my money as hard as I possibly can, holding things as tight as I possibly could, I felt like I was in control. Really? And imagine yourself next to this large rock and you feel the pressure, you're next to this big rock and you are pressed against it. And it's just like, I am in control of this because you feel it against you. And in reality, that rock is on top of you. It is crushing you. Mm-hmm. You can barely breathe with that rock. But by me letting go, that rock was removed from me and I was actually free. I was actually free when I was able to let that go. In the same way, by me clenching onto my money so tight, when I gave that to God, I was actually free to be generous. I was free to of that. I wasn't in control. I was being controlled.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of the biggest perspective change. And that may be a terrible metaphor, but I think that the irony in it for me was that I thought I was in control when in reality it was controlling me. And because I said I can't unexperience that moment. For me, it was like, okay, what else did I miss the point on? Right? Like, God loves us too much to say, okay, I'll let you have those parts of your life. And, cause I would be like, okay, you can have that part, but this part, God, that's mine. And
right.
In this case,
like
it
the
was
rich young ruler.
Right. Like this is mine, God, and you can't have that. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, that made me realize like what other part, like that was incredible. God freed me from this. Mm-hmm. So what other parts of my life have I not surrendered to? Because if they're there, take it, God. Whatever you've got in store for me is better than I could have ever imagined it being. So it's constantly seeking out, like, and sometimes it's by accident, right? Like completely by accident that I may not have realized I have inadvertently tried to take control over my own life and not surrender things to God. Mm-hmm. But that part is something that I've consistently tried to pursue at that point. It's just, what else am I trying to hold on to that I have not surrendered to God? Because whatever he's got in store for this is much better than anything I could have thought I had.
I think that's a wonderful metaphor. Honestly, I can make that same application to pastoring Passion Creek. Mm-hmm. Like I had to get to the point where I was just willing to let it go. Mm-hmm. And then that's when finally things started to work. Mm-hmm. And it's just it feels like a paradox, like an oxymoron. When you let go is actually when you begin to experience that abundance. I mentioned the Easter baptism with your son. That Easter Sunday, we gave that because you said clenched fist, and that's actually the metaphor Henry Nouwen uses in his book. I think it's called Open Hands. But he essentially compared and contrast paranoia with metanoia. Mm-hmm. So to be paranoid is to be holding on. And there's something that is comforting about gripping. It's the perfect illustration is what you're saying, right? You feel like you're in control, even though it's the very thing that's killing you.
Right.
Metanoia that's why metanoia, repentance is, that's the Greek word for repentance. And I like to use it because it rhymes with paranoia. So, but metanoia is just this letting go and changing your understanding of reality, because metanoia is saying, hey, that rock is actually a boulder that's pressing you and killing you. This whole time you thought it was the very thing that brought you life. When Christ comes, he opens up our minds. That's why Jesus says, give them ears to hear and eyes to see, because that thing you think you need is the very thing that's crushing you.
Right.
And so metanoia is a change of mind, understanding of what reality really is, which that's why I love Dallas Willard's definition of faith. It's faith is confidence grounded in reality. Because ultimately the kingdom of God, that is reality. Being generous, that's not some theory that like, hey, your life's, no, like it is reality. Your life will be better when you become generous. You know, it's not just because Jesus said so. Jesus said so because it's true, you know? So I think that's a wonderful metaphor. We will keep it in the podcast.
You know, so if you're listening to this podcast, if giving is something that you have struggled to do with, here's what I would just say from my story for you to think about is like, I wasted a lot of time not trusting God with our finances. I think about the years of pain and just struggling and frustration. Maybe it could have gotten let go earlier. Maybe it couldn't have. Who knows? You know, God's timing is God's timing.
Yeah.
And but I do think that I wasted a lot of time not trusting God with our finances. And again, there's so much irony in it, thinking that my money, my stuff, my time is all mine. And not realizing, believing that, surrendering in the fact that what I have been given to me by God, right? Like that's it's all been given to me. C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity. You may have to correct me on the way I'm talking about this story, but he talks about a son goes to a father, and he says to his dad, like, Dad, can I have some money? I'd like to buy you a gift. So the dad gives the son money, and the son goes and buys the dad a gift and gets his dad a gift. Well, is that dad actually richer than he was at the beginning of this? No, he's not. But this act of love, this act of kindness, and towards God, this act of worship is truly where this is going.
Depends on your definition of rich, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I don't remember that in Mere Christianity. I need to read it again. That's such a good book, though. So helpful. I love his metaphor of the hallway. Like, I'm just talking about the hallway. These denominations are different rooms in the house, but what is merely the things we can all agree on that makes us distinctly Christian?
Oh yeah, it's good. That's a good one.
It's a good podcast when C.S. Lewis is referenced, so I appreciate you for that. Thank you. It's somewhere down here. It might even be in the frame, wherever the L's are. Anyways, Mere Christianity is a good one.
But there was a lot of irony in that, right? There's irony in believing that I was entitled for more when I'm entitled to nothing but separation from God because of my own sin. And it's only because of grace that I am blessed with anything at all.
Amen. We actually are... we're going to talk about that tomorrow. So we're recording this on a Saturday. So tomorrow we're looking at Acts 20, and Paul talks about warning against the wolves who will come to take, to ravage the flock. And it's so interesting because if you actually follow the narrative, Paul is in tears. He's saying, don't fall for the wolves. And here's the scary part, that are among you. Like, there are people in the church right now that seem fine, and either they already have malicious intent or the enemy captures their mind and heart. But so then you see him write 1st and 2nd Timothy, and he's getting more particular. Hey, watch out for that false teacher. And this, so now we know years have gone by and Ephesus is struggling because Timothy's the lead pastor of the church at Ephesus. But then what does Jesus say in Revelation 2? He gives a letter to the church. Now, again, this is according to people's eschatological understandings. I think that letter actually did also apply to the church at Ephesus when it was written, when Revelation was written. And they said, hey, you got really good at defeating false teachers, but you forgot your first love. Come back. And I think in generosity, you can get like, hey, you got good at getting that recurring thing going. You got good at this or that, but you forgot, like, all of this is grace. This is all the Lord's.
Oh, yeah.
And if we forget that, we are so strayed far from the whole plot line. And so it's always coming back to his love for us.
So you bring up an interesting point. I wrote down a note in preparation for this, and I think it might be very relevant to what you're saying, right? Like, you've got that down to your tithing, you've got that going, right? And so I had made a comment earlier about prioritizing margin for the long term, right?
Yeah.
Which is why we build out our calendar, we build out our budgets for the entire year. We know typically what's coming up and ahead of time, and we prioritize margin so there is room every biweekly check for some sort of generosity should it pop up on spontaneously, right? Mm-hmm. Now, conversely, what I would also say, and it might sound a little bit opposite of what I was saying, and this is sometimes we'll pay premium costs for things if we know it's going to support local business.
Good point.
Right. I'm
really glad you're bringing this up.
The president of Shopify brought up a really interesting concept, and I struggled to find the lecture that he was talking. It wasn't a lecture. I think it was probably like an earnings call or something like that. But he was talking about the difference between high value and low value commerce, right?
Okay.
So I can go to Amazon.com, I can go to Walmart and get just about anything I could ever want. And I could have it in my door possibly later this afternoon.
Sure.
But did I create relationships? Like, did I contribute to the local culture? Do I know my neighbors better? Like, where I go to purchase goods and services, it matters. Now, again, that's not to say we shouldn't do that and we can't do that. Like, I don't know if I'm going to find a small business that has who knows what at 6 a.m. when I actually need it, or at 11 o'clock at night when I'm there, right?
Yeah.
But I think that that low value commerce where I can click a button, add to cart, go and move, that's sometimes that can help people. But does that build relationships? Does that contribute to the community? Does that allow you to meet those around you? And I think that, he describes low value commerce as that click to buy, deliver to door. You never meet another human being ever again. As we're high value commerce, I give you an example. Like, I go to my mechanic. I know they're more expensive than if I were to go to a chain car mechanic. But I go there because I trust them. I go there and I pay extra because I enjoy them as human beings. I get to go in there and I get to talk with them and get to know them. And it sounds kind of silly, but we were looking at getting a one of the rooms, our carpet redone. So we would have carpet come over. My wife happened to be making bread at the time, and the salesman came and was like, "Gosh, it smells so good in here. Would you like a piece of bread?" Right? Like, so he came in, he sat at our table. We ate literally, we broke literally bread together. And learn more about him, his wife, and his grandkids, and spent time together. And eventually we got around to the carpet quote. But you don't get to contribute to the community. You don't get to know your neighbor. You don't get to enrich other people's lives if we're always just clicking buttons and getting things sent directly to our doors.
Yeah, the Hebrews really understood this. And you could even see, you can go to Jewish communities throughout America, and they take care of each other by paying each other really well to do the service that they know how to do. My grandpa always taught me that. My grandpa's like, sure, you can learn how to fix your car. And then he's like, or from even just a business standpoint, or you can take that same amount of time and make even more money doing the thing you're good at, and then blessing somebody who's good at that thing with money. So I have a neighbor that he's a mechanic, and it's just been really great to get to know him. And so anytime I have issues, I'm excited because I'm I get to have a touch point with my neighbor again.
Right.
And then he has, talked about, he's like, yeah, you don't have to pay. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm going to pay you more than whatever, even AutoZone or whatever. You're my friend. I want to bless you. I know your kids. I'm excited to bless your family this way. And it's not even, you bless me, and just him talking and this isn't him complaining, and I'm not saying his name out loud anyways, but other people, they barely give him enough money to even pay for the items that he needs to get to fix the vehicle. Right. I'm like, where have we lost the plot line? It is okay to be, that's a good example of being generous. There's, and there's always a stage of life and where you're at. If you're broke, don't be, giving money, you have to be wise about all of this. But I know some guys who own restaurants, and I'm like, we're going to go there more often because I know them. Yeah. And I'm excited. I Lord willing, we get a church building, but I actually love meeting in the community. The Black Rock, I walk in, they already have my coffee made because they just know. Yep. And so then I just give them cash, and it's great. It's a really cool, good relationship. We have to remember that. It's what a blessing to bless, even to tip. That all of that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a good point too, which I'm glad you did, about margins. Like, you could learn to do this skill yourself. That's actually, I think that can be a good way of prioritizing margin, not just from a numbers standpoint of like, I got, the cheapest cable bill, I got the cheapest phone line, I got the cheapest car payment, etc. But also, like, when things pop up, you could take the opportunity to learn a new skill yourself. I mean, YouTube, I remodeled an entire house from YouTube tutorials.
Nice.
And there are other good ways of doing that, right? Buying used, going to secondhand stores. Like, even though we have had more finances come in over the years, we still maintain those practices of lowering margins where possible. And again, conversely, like I was talking about, like, trying to pay premium where we can to local and small businesses to enrich the community and get to know our neighbors. But
and that's living by the Spirit.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, no, learn this thing yourself and do it on your own.
Yeah.
Other times, bless that person. Yeah. And I love your point, and I'll let you keep going. We're called to raise not our standard of living, but raise our standard of giving, which you can only do by creating margin in your life.
Absolutely. I think that, if anybody's listening to this being like, all right, I got a checklist, I have got to, learn to do skills on YouTube, I have got to pay premiums, it's not a checklist, right?
Yeah.
Anybody listening, my encouragement is don't boil the ocean.
Nice. I like that.
Don't boil the ocean. Just focus on God. Be in the moment. Be present. Be in the moment and be present. There was something else I was gonna close that up with, and maybe it'll come back to me in a second.
And that's what I love about the literature, as you're thinking, the literature of the Old Testament, the wisdom literature. You have Proverbs that's like, do this and this will be done for you. Mm-hmm. And then Ecclesiastes is like, this is kind of all meaningless. And then Job is like, you can do everything right and you're going to suffer a lot. Mm-hmm. It's just always good to remind people and this can be a cop-out, but, Holy Spirit work through you. Yeah, it's not this huge checklist if you do all this perfectly. It's not a formula. At the same time, budgeting smart. Like, there are some things you should do, but yeah, you have to. It's a lot of wisdom, a lot of God. Am I called to bless this neighbor, or do I need to figure out how to fix my car myself? Okay, the answer is not the same for all of us,
Mm-hmm. Right, and just that maybe I think this might be a good opportunity to share this as well, because there might be times where you can't pay a premium to a small business. You have to learn for yourself, but it requires you to ask for help. Right. And I went through this with a good friend of mine where I refused to pay. I refused. That's probably not the right thing to say. It was very expensive to do this car payment, and the part was cheap, but the labor was really expensive for it because it was an invasive job to the car.
Yep.
I was like, all right, I'm going to tackle it. We're going to give it a shot. We're going to try. And I struggled through it. We got through it, but my friend called me. He's like, why didn't you call me? I've done this a bunch of times. I got all the tools for it. I could have helped you out. And it's like, I don't think to call my friends in that because I have YouTube and I just YouTube and I take things on. But there is this part of this as well where it's good to ask for help.
Yeah. What an opportunity to make friends and love other people.
That's right.
Through all of your issues.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good. Is there anything else we haven't covered? I mean, I've just been so enjoying this, but, yeah. Is there any? We've covered a lot. I'm here running through the Rolodex of stuff that we've gone through.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Wonderful. Man, I just want to say thank you then, just for taking time. Also, thank you for just how much you serve our church. What a joy seeing you pretty much every Saturday morning helping us set up. Your favorite instrument is not the drums, but you met a need, right? So
if you're a drummer listening to this, come save me.
No, I think that just really shows your heart. You have a heart of humility. I think we just became so much better when you and BB joined the church.
Thank you.
And so I'm really grateful for you. It's been a little over a year now, or maybe right at a year. Mm-hmm. We've known each other for decades, technically. Mm-hmm. But man, what a joy. I appreciate your heart for your children. I appreciate your heart for men. I think you're a man's man, and I think it's good to have more of those at our church. Not that we have any sissy la-las, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Man, that might go a direction I don't want to go. But yeah, I'm just grateful for you, man. And thank you for being generous. And thank you for just being faithful to the call. So
thanks for having me, Trey.
Absolutely, man. Well, if you enjoyed the podcast, what should they comment below? We try to, if they made it this far, we need a signal. What's a word or a phrase that maybe stuck out from this conversation? Putting you on the spot, I know.
How about strep throat? No, I'm just kidding.
Strep throat it is. It's done.
I can't unsay it. No. I don't know. You pick.
No, it's strep throat.
Okay.
It has to be something like that where it's like really random. So like clearly, because think about the person who's like going on the video for the first time and going, why are people commenting strep throat? So amazing. Grace and peace to you guys. Thank you so much. And we hit right at an hour. What a joy.